Welcome back to another Algebra Skills video. This time we'll be discussing inequalities, how to write them in interval notation, and how we can use them when solving linear equations with inequalities in them. To start, an inequality is just an equation where the equal sign is replaced with the sign meaning less than, the sign meaning greater than, the sign meaning less than or equal to, and the sign meaning greater than or equal to. Until you're familiar with these, we can remember them by thinking if we have two numbers and an inequality, we can think of this as an alligator trying to eat the bigger number. Excellent. Now, when we're asked to represent inequalities, there are a couple of ways we can do that. The first of them is called interval notation. An interval is some segment of the real line which we can describe as either a graph or as a type of equation using inequalities. We can see if we have x greater than a, we can write that as the interval from a up to infinity and graph it on a number line. Similarly, if x is less than a, this is the interval from negative infinity all the way up until a, and we can see this graphed on a number line here. This process is similar when we have greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, except we change the round parentheses to a square bracket to indicate that a is part of the interval because it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to that value of a. Finally, we can combine two of these inequalities in a row to talk about places where x is between a and b. That's where x is greater than a but less than b. Or similarly, where a is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to b, or both. If we ever want to use interval notation, we can follow these steps where we draw the desired interval on the number line, if that helps you visualize what it looks like. Then we can identify the leftmost part of the interval. Sometimes this is our number, and sometimes this goes all the way down to negative infinity, if we're just less than some number. If that number is in the interval, that is, if our endpoint is included in the interval, like it's part of the interval, it's equal to it, then we use a square bracket. If it's not, we use a round parentheses. And if we just have an interval that's less than some number, we're going all the way down to minus infinity. And since minus infinity is not a real number, we will always use the round parentheses when representing intervals that go to minus infinity or up to plus infinity. Let's try some examples. If we're looking at the interval from minus 2 to 5, where minus 2 is less than x, but x is less than or equal to 5, if we want, we could imagine this as a number line with minus 2 here and 5 here. And of course, we're dealing with the region between minus 2 and 5. To write this in interval notation, we know that 2 is not part of the interval since minus 2 is less than x, or equivalently, x is greater than minus 2. So that gets a round parentheses. But x is less than or equal to 5. 5 is in our interval, so we use a square bracket. If we were to write this in interval notation then, we would write -2, 5, and only the 5 as a square bracket. Similarly, if x is less than 5, we can imagine a number line with a 5 on it right here. X is less than 5, so it includes all the numbers to the left, going all the way to -infinity. Whenever we're dealing with an infinity in an interval, it always gets around parentheses. And we're going up to 5, which is not part of our interval. X is less than 5, x is not equal to 5, so it also gets around 1. We can also do this without drawing the number line if we want to. If x is greater than 10, that means that we're starting at 10 with a round parentheses, and we're going up. There's no upper bound, it goes all the way up to infinity. And again, infinities always have round parentheses.